Aloha! My name is Alan Tsuchiyama and I'm here today to show you a little bit about Hawaii. Today we're going to be showing you Saimin. And I'm from Kapilani Community College from Honolulu, Hawaii, by the way. And it's a beautiful day out there. But today we're going to show you Saimin. Okay, so to Saimin, a little bit of history about Saimin. Saimin is very unique to Hawaii. It is not ramen, it is not Chinese noodles, it is Saimin. And Saimin is spelled S-A-I-M-I-N. And I guess the word kind of got derived from the Chinese word Saimin, which means Sai, thin, and Min, noodle. So thin noodle. But when we look into history, they can't figure out if it's Japanese, if it's Chinese, but they do know that it started during the Plantation era. So during the sugarcane and pineapple, in the fields, all the different cultures would come together, all the different ethnic groups, the Chinese, the Filipinos, the Japanese, the Okinawans, and they would all come together and they'd be eating in the field. When they eat in the field, they open up their box lunches and they all would share with each other. You know, and over time they would get to really start to taste each other's foods. And this is how I think it came about, that they started to create this Saimin that is like no other in the world. It is basically a shrimp and kombu broth, which is very unusual. But it has hints of Japanese. And then we have the noodles, which is hints of Chinese. And it's kind of like put together. So today we're going to be making this for you. So let's see. So in the pot here we have 5 cups of water. It's going to be simmering. I already soaked this for 2 hours in here. And I just turned this on just a little while ago. So now in this pot I have 5 cups of water, which will later on reduce down to 4 cups of water. And if it goes below 4 cups of water, we bring it back to 4 cups of water. Because the only thing that's evaporating is water, not flavor, not salt, anything, just water, right? So we're going to bring it back to 4 cups. So we have some dried shrimp in here. Again, the dried shrimp is very important. Get good quality dried shrimp. This dried shrimp comes from the U.S. Dried shrimp here, but you know there's other dried shrimps that are good for making this broth. And the better quality shrimp, the more you're going to pay, but the better tasting broth you're going to have. So we have some shrimps in here. We also have, and by the way, the recipes will be provided for you a little bit later. So we have some shrimps in here. We have kombu, which is dashi kombu, not nishime kombu, dashi kombu. And we also have a pork bone, because we're going to be using pork as one of the garnishes. So I took the pork bone off. I already blanched it in water, which means I kind of cooked it for 5 minutes. I discarded that water. I took the bone out and put it in here. The reason why I do that is we want to get rid of all of the impurities, all of the blood. We want to cook that out. So I put it into this pot that it doesn't cloud our broth. This broth should be very, very clear. So here I have the broth that's working. It's going to sit here for 2 hours. I don't have 2 hours, so I actually made one already, so it's coming up soon. But we're going to bring this to a boil because I kind of want to show you when it starts to foam how to skim this pot, because that's also very important. If you're not skimming the pot, all the scum that's floating to the surface, then it's going to be cloudy. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're taking care of a few things. You never want to boil it. Once it comes to a simmer, I'm going to turn it way down. You want to go gently with the simmer. You want to skim, and you don't want to disturb this stock. And you want to have a clear broth, and that's what we want to have. We want a clear, beautiful broth. And this recipe is my grandfather's recipe. And I was born and raised on the island of Kauai. He actually made Saimin from scratch, the noodles from scratch, which is hard work. Let me tell you, it's hard work. I remember going to his house as a youngster, and he had kind of like this house on a hill. So under his house is where he would be making it, with lots of fresh air coming through the bottom of the house. And he would make this early in the morning because it's so hard work. If he makes it in the middle of the day, he'd be sweating. So he makes it early in the morning. He kind of like puts it in bundles and dries it on his table. And you know, as kids, we would go down, we would sneak some noodles and we would eat it. So good. So anyways, so he would be making this, and at the same time, he would be making his broth. And when we came in, because it was always a occasion. It was something that we would look forward to because it was such hard work. When we would come into the door and we would smell this beautiful broth, it's like, oh my God, it's just unbelievable. So this is what we're making for you today. So I have a lot of connection to this Saimin dish that my grandfather prepared, and he perfected, and he passed it on to my brother, who also did it very well. So you know, and I'm gonna try my best here. Okay, so we have this going. Next, we're gonna be cooking up our pork chops. So we're gonna put our stove on here. Just gonna put a little bit of oil. We don't want a whole lot of oil. Huh? We just want a little bit of oil. I want some of this fat to come off. I want to use this fat at the end of the dish, and we're gonna be using it as a flavoring. And you know, as youngsters, when we were sitting at the table, we weren't able to use this fat. And this is the fat. It comes off like this. See? So we were able to use this and put this in our Saimin because I guess it wasn't so good for health. Huh? But the older people, my mom, my dad, my grandma, my grandpa, they all could put it in if they wanted to, but we couldn't. But today, we're going to be putting it in because I can eat it now. I'm older. Okay, so here we go. So we got our pan, it's getting hot. We're going to put our pork in here. Before we put our pork, let's season this guy up. A little bit of salt. A little salt, a little pepper. So you see the scum floating on the top of this, on the top here. Right now I'm going to turn this guy down, this broth. We're going to get it really slow. As soon as I get this pork in the pan, I'm going to show you how to skim that. Okay, so we got this salt, some pepper. Let's get this in our pan. So this one got lots of fat. See it? Lots of fat. We want that. We want that to render out so we can get that topping for our ramen. Okay, so we're gonna cook this guy up, and we're gonna cook this now. I'm gonna turn this down real low. We're gonna make this really low. We're gonna cook this slowly. Okay, so here I have some water, and the water is just to kind of clean my ladle here. So we got this ladle, and we're just gonna go to the top and kind of like just go to the edge of the pot. Okay, so if I push like this, you see all of the foam starts to build up here, and you tilt that edge of that pot, edge of that ladle right into the foam, and everything goes right in there, just like that. So when you guys are making stocks, any kind of stock, and you want to take the impurities off the top, all the junk that floats to the top, this is kind of what you do to take that off. Okay, and we would let this simmer. We would skim every once in a while. We'd let this simmer, and this is a simmer that you want. Barely any bubbles floating on the top, coming to the surface. That's what you want to see. The bubbles just barely breaking the surface of the water, of the stock. Okay, so this is going to sit here for another 2 hours, but I don't have time for that, so we're going to put this down here. And I'm going to bring up this guy. Okay, so we're going to bring up this guy. This guy is ready to go. Boom. It's been there now for 2 hours, and as you can see, it reduced down. So I'm going to be adding some water to it. I have some water here somewhere. I'm going to be adding some water to it, and we're going to bring it up to four cups. Okay. So again, we're just going to be cooking this guy until it's well done. We don't want to overcook it, but I would leave this piece in here for a long period of time because I want to render that fat out. And once I get that done, then it should kind of look like this. So this piece I'm not going to be eating. Lots of fat to be overcooked, but this is the guy that I'm going to be eating. So here we have the pork that I already pre-cooked right here. So we're going to cut this guy up for garnish. So I'm going to take this off, get this out of the way, and let's cut this guy off. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to cut this guy up, and basically we're just going to slice this up. So in Saimin, right, basic Saimin, basically what you're going to have in our basic Saimin is the noodles, is the beautiful shrimp broth that we have. And we're going to put some garnishes on. And usually the garnishes would be some kamaboko, which is here. This is the red and white kamaboko that we have. We're going to slice this up for you soon. We have some eggs that are going to be making a kind of like an omelet, a really thin crepe, and we're going to be cutting into really thin strips, and that's going to be for garnish. We have some green onions here that's going to go for garnish, and we also have this pork. So now the pork here that we have, many times they use char siu instead of pork, but on Kauai, my grandfather used pork because we didn't have any char siu. There's no stores back then that's selling char siu, so he would just make his pork in the pan, which is great because then you got the fat that you could put on the ramen, right? I mean the Saimin, and it's just awesome. So we have our pork here. We have our pork fat now. We're going to cut up our kamaboko here. And this is kind of how I cut my kamaboko. So it's on a stick. So to make it, they put it on a stick like this. So instead of taking it off the stick, we're just gonna cut it right on the stick like this. Okay? So we just cut this guy just like this. And later on today, I'm gonna show you guys how to make fried noodles. So in the fried noodles, we're gonna cut this guy up into strips. So this is kind of the same thing I do. I cut like this, and then later on I'm gonna take it off the stick and cut it into strips. But right now, for the Saimin, not the fried Saimin, but the Saimin, we want to have just larger pieces. So we kind of do this, just like that. Okay? And basically it comes out looking like that. Okay, so we got that. That's done. I'll put this on the side for later. And we have our green onions. Let me cut my green onions before we get to our eggs here. When you guys are cutting green onions, I tell my students this all the time. So if I have, this is probably what, 18 inches of green onions here, right? And if I cut it, it takes me, I don't know, maybe a minute. But if I cut it in half, and I go here, now it's 9 inches of green onions, now it's gonna take me half the time. If I cut it in half and I put it more, it's gonna be even shorter period of time. So I try to, whatever's manageable for you is what we wanna do. So I cut it like this here. And basically when you hold my green onions, my pinky and my thumb hold the green onions together. The other three are on top. We call that the guiding hands. We're not cutting our fingers off. And we basically cut, okay? Just like that. And it takes practice. I tell my students that green onions is probably the best thing to practice on. So it's a great vegetable to practice on. It's just straight, easy to cut, not tough. So if you want to practice, use a green onion. Okay, here we go. So this is a lot of green onions. I'm already thinking ahead, and I'm prepping some of these green onions for my fried noodles that I'm about to make for you. So I got lots in here. For my Saimin right now is just gonna take a little bit of green onions, but I have a lot for my next dish. Okay, so we have green onions, we have pork, we have fish cake. Now let's work on our egg. Then we can cook our Saimin. So I cut this off. I wanted to show you guys. So this green onion here. So let's say you want to plant some green onions, right? So you would cut your green onions, leave it like this instead of going all the way down. You can eat all the way down to here. So you can eat all the way down to the white, which I did for this. I cut most of it out. But if you want to plant green onions, you cut it like this. You stick this back into the ground, and boom, new green onion is going to come out. You can get green onions forever. Especially if your green onions are good. Sometimes you have heirloom green onions. My grand-uncle, he had green onions that was super thin, almost looked like chives, and he just loved those green onions. So he would always tell me, save the bottom, so he can replant it. So he would always have small green onions, because in the stores, there's no small green onions, no thin green onions. But that's what he liked. So that's what he did. Okay, so last, we're gonna do our eggs. So here we go, we have eggs. I got 2 eggs here. The recipe for the next dish is 1 egg, but I'm gonna make 2 eggs now. I'm gonna make 2 eggs because I need for 2 dishes. So okay, so just go beat this eggs up as best we can. Let me put this pan on the stove here. Turn the handle that way. Helps the cameraman when I turn the handle that way. Okay, here we go. So, scramble this guy up. We're gonna put a little bit of oil in the pan. So if you go, because you only probably will be making 1 egg, take a smaller pan. I'm making 2 eggs, so I got a little bit bigger pan here. we go. It's hot. Almost. Okay, so here we go. So I'm gonna put this egg in here, just like this. Like the eggs. Move it around. I'm gonna turn this down a bit. We don't want it to get too brown. So as you can see, the egg, now the egg starts to get a little bit more, it's getting thicker, right? So it's starting to coagulate. You see that it's not running anymore. So that's a good sign that we're almost ready to turn this over. So we're gonna wait just a little bit. While we cook this, finish cooking this guy, it's gonna take like another 15 seconds. I'm gonna strain this stock. So we have right here, we have our stock that's been simmering for 2 hours. We wanna strain it through here, like this. Or if you'd like, you could use one of these guys here. You can use one of these guys here, and you can actually fish it out if you wanted to. Okay, but I like this method. So we want to get 4 cups. So I don't have 4 cups here. I'm gonna have to go get my water here. Okay, here we go. So we have water. I'm gonna take this up to 4 cups now. Get my 4 cups. And we're going to put it back into this pot. So this here, you know, you could take this if it's still okay. You can take this and you can turn it into, like, you can put some sugar, shoyu inside, turn it into like a tsukidani. The shrimps you could use, but you know, everything in here, not a whole lot of flavor. It's been simmering for 2 hours now, right? So, you know, my grandpa used to save it, but I don't know what he used it for. Maybe he threw it in the garden. So we got our dashi now here. It's pretty clear. We're gonna put a little bit of salt. This is I'm gonna take my omelet out. Let it cool off a bit. Let it cool off a bit, then I can slice it up. Right now we're gonna season this up. So my grandfather's recipe had basically MSG in it, okay? But MSG is monosodium glutamate, and monosodium glutamate was founded by Dr. Ikeda in Japan, and he found that this monosodium glutamate, or this glutamate, came out from seaweed, and they would enhance the flavor of foods. They would give it more of a umami flavor, more of a savory kind of a flavor. So we have MSG here. I have some salt here. So we're gonna put like a 1/4 teaspoon of salt in there, a 1/4 teaspoon of MSG. If you don't want MSG, you don't have to add it in. But let me tell you, it makes it taste really good. Okay, so anyways, we're gonna let this come to simmer again. Stir this guy up. Taste this. So good. Wish you were here, you could smell this. It's wonderful. The aroma is amazing. Okay, so while we get that coming to a simmer, I am going to bring up my pot from under the table. Oh, and it was giving me a steam bath down there. Okay, turn it off, yes. Okay, so now we have our pot here. You guys don't have to have such a big pot. You know, if it's you're only cooking a couple, you just have a little pot, and you can just dump it out, or you can take one of these guys and fish it out, right? Smaller pot is okay. I'm going to be using this pot of water for 2 dishes today. That's why my pot is so big. Okay, so you can see that it's boiling. You need this to be boiling when you start the Saimin. If it's not boiling, your noodle is not going to be cooking. It's just going to sit there. It's going to get soggy and sticky and yucky. So you want to make sure that it's boiling before you put your Saimin inside. Okay, but before we do that, we're going to cut up our last garnish here. So last garnish is the egg. So we're going to cut this in half. Pull this right over, cut this in half. Here. Okay. Again, some of this egg is for the Saimin, and some of this egg gonna be for our fried Saimin a little bit later on. So this is for fried Saimin. This is for Saimin now. Okay, here we go. So we got our garnishes here ready to go. Now we're gonna start cooking. Okay, so we got our noodles. We're gonna put our noodles in this water that's boiling. Like I said, we need it to boil. As soon as you go, see how the boil went down? It went down just from this little packet of Saimin. That boiling went down to nothing. So if it's not boiling, then when you put it in, it goes even lower. And now it's not at the right temperature to cook. So Saimin we have, in Hawaii, we're so fortunate. You know, we have Sun Noodle, and when the owner of Sun Noodle came over from Japan, I think he was 19 years old. He came over with basically a suitcase and a Saimin machine, with a ramen machine with him, thinking that he was going to make ramen. Well, when he got here, there was no ramen. Nobody wanted to eat ramen. Everybody wanted to eat Saimin. So he adapted, and he learned to make Saimin. And now he has a huge company started here in California, in New Jersey, that services New York also, and he's starting to go international now with his ramen noodles and Saimin. So, you know, Saimin, you know, he knows that Saimin is a big part of his fortune. So he's you know, he wants to make sure that Saimin continues to grow, and he actually makes two different kinds of Saimin. So I'm going to use his two different Saimin. One Saimin here is thinner, and it's, you know, Saimin is chewier. Saimin is chewier than ramen. It's perfect. Okay, so when you want to taste this, you want to make sure that you're taking out as much moisture as you can here, because if you have a lot of moisture here, then it's going to dilute your broth here, right? So you want to take out as much as you can. You see the guys in the ramen shop shaking, making sure everything is on. Okay, then we pour this in the bowl. Oop. And we'll turn this off. I'm going to get this down here. I'll put this down because we're done cooking. Okay. Let's get our broth in. Okay, so we have our broth here. So I have some scum floating to the surface. Remember, we don't want that, right? Nobody wants that floating on their Saimin. So let's take this off. And let's leave this on. I'm gonna fluff this noodles up a bit, loosen it. Oh yeah, it's looking good. Okay, so we're gonna put some eggs. We'll put some pork. A few pieces of fish cake. And some green onions. And you know, when I was growing up, we always put a little bit of pepper on our Saimin. Again, pepper, the oil, the fat from the pork just takes it to another level. So just a little bit of pepper on there, be good, and some pork fats. A little bit of pork fat here. Let this melt. And here you have beautiful Hawaii Saimin. Yum. Another popular dish in Hawaii using Saimin is fried Saimin. So we're going to show you today how to make fried Saimin. So when you're selecting your noodles, I hope you can get some Saimin noodles where you're from. But if not, I would go out and look for a ramen noodle that is on the chewier side and maybe a little thicker on the thicker side, kind of like this noodle. So this noodle here is a little bit larger, a little thicker than the one that I use in the broth. Yeah, but it can be interchangeable. You know, in Hawaii, we're okay with both the thin or the thicker one. And you know, characteristics usually you can see that this noodle here is a little curly, and many of our Saimin noodles, they're actually, after you cook them, they're still pretty curly or wavy. But you know, that's kind of what you want to look for. If you can't find Saimin noodles, look for a ramen noodle that might be a little more chewy, a little thicker, especially when you're going to be making this fried Saimin, because this fried Saimin, it needs to withstand the boiling and then the sauteing, and then you're going to have to be able to eat it, and it's not going to be all mushy on you. Okay, so I selected this Saimin here because it's a little thicker, a little chewier, and both made from sun noodle, because you know, sun noodle, they know that everybody is a little bit different as far as their textures that they want to experience when eating Saimin. Okay, so here we go. So first of all, before I start the noodles, because the Saimin noodles in this pot goes really fast. So first we're going to be cutting up our cabbage. So cabbage is going to take just a few minutes. So I'm going to start heating up my pan here. I'm going to put the oil in a little bit later. So here we have our cabbage. So our cabbage, basically, we're going to cut through the core here. And I only need 4 ounces. So I'm going to only use 1/4 of this cabbage here, because I already weighed it out. This guy was about a little over a pound, so I took off. I'm going to take this core out. So I cut it into quarters. I'm going to take this core out. Just kind of like lay it down flat. It's always best when you guys are cutting and things are flat, laying flat, instead of rocking like this. When it rocks, that's when you're going to cut your finger off. So you want to make sure it's flat surface like this. Take your knife, 45-degree angle, and just cut up that core. Okay, because we don't want the core. Nobody wants to eat that core. Okay, now you see the fiber of these leaves are running from the bottom of where the root was to the top. So when you cut this cabbage, what you want to do is you want to cut against the fibers. So the fibers are running this way. You want to get your knife perpendicular to those fibers and cut. Okay, so I'm going to cut a few here. I'm going to cut this in half because I want it to be almost all the same size, and go ahead and cut like this. Okay, just like that. So now we have our cabbage. Okay, so our cabbage is cut here. You see something dark in here. Let's take this out. And this is our local cabbage here from Hawaii. So a little bit of oil in a pan. We're gonna put our cabbage in there. While this guy is cooking, let me finish up cutting this fish cake. So the fish cake here. Sorry guys, get out. Where's my knife off? Okay, so the fish cake, again, we're just gonna finish cutting this off the stick. Yeah. And we're gonna cut this out. See, so you know, remember I cut it on the stick, right? Cut it, sliced it, easy, took it off, and now I'm just gonna cut this into strips now. So pretty simple like that. We're not gonna put this in the pan yet. All we want to do is warm this. We don't necessarily have to cook this so much, huh? And here I have some char siu, huh? So some char siu, some Chinese roast pork. People in Hawaii just love Chinese roast pork. And you know, this one is, I made this one. This one came out of my oven at home, and I hung it in my oven and roasted it. But this char siu isn't as red, but in Hawaii, locals, we love our char siu nice and red. So it's real red. It's kind of I think that's also a Hawaii thing, that, you know, red is good luck. So we like everyday red. More luck the better. So we visit Vegas a lot. Okay, here we go. So we got this cooking. This is almost done now. This cabbage is almost done. So we can go ahead and start cooking our Saimin noodles. So this Saimin noodles is about 10 ounces here of Saimin noodles. We're gonna put that in here. Again, this guy should be boiling up. So it was boiling. We're gonna put this in here. We're gonna make sure we move it around. And you know, I wanna move it around so it doesn't stick together. And also we wanna move it around so we kind of take off some of that excess starch, because the excess starch later on gonna equate to our Saimin noodles kind of sticking together. So we wanna keep moving this guy around. Okay, so now we're gonna put our char siu in there. We're gonna put our fish cake, our kamaboko. We can put our eggs. Maybe I'll save a little bit of eggs for garnish. I'm gonna put some green onions. A lot of green onions is good. Okay. And we're gonna season this. So you can season this with the packet of seasoning that's inside of your saimin or ramen. You can use that, and that's what I'm going to be using today. I'm going to use one. Just one should be enough for this package this here. Let me check this. This should be almost done. This is definitely almost done. Check this. Noodles. We don't want to overcook it. Perfect. Still firm. Okay, so got this open. Again, try to get as much as we can off here. Moisture off. Get that in there. Season. And a little bit of pepper. Okay. Turn this fire off already. That's good enough. So I like when I do this fried noodles, if I give my cabbage a little bit of color here, you see that it's kind of caramelizing here. I think that's great flavor for your noodles. So don't be afraid to give it some color. Just don't burn it. Okay, here we go. Let's plate this guy up. Smells good. Veggies. Get rid of this. And let's put a little bit of green onions. Finish it off. Put the eggs on top. There you go. Fried Saimin.
Hi, so joining me today is the Kapiolani Community College Culinary Program's educational specialist, Daniel Leong, because we're going to talk noodles, yeah? Mm-hmm. So one thing I wanted to address is that saimin is different from ramen. The broth in ramen is very different. When you think of tonkotsu broth, it's like a super rich, crazy infused flavors, right? They put in oils and other things. So I think some people who have never had saimin before get a shock because they think, oh, where's the flavor in this broth? Mm-hmm. But it's really more about the subtlety of the shrimp, the dried shrimp, the seaweed, and whatever else you decide to put into it. But the reason I wanted to talk to you is about how to eat noodles, because I think of you as an expert. So what are things people should be doing when they eat ramen or saimin?
Well, the first thing is you want to eat it quick and not wait for the noodle to cool down. The best way to eat it is piping hot, steam coming out of the noodle, because when it cools down, the noodle gets softer and it soaks too long in the broth.
So when it soaks in the broth, is it absorbing the broth?
Yeah, absorb the broth, and then it may get even thicker and softer. So you want the texture which is bouncy, called al dente, right? So the timing is very important. you don't want to spend too much time sitting around talking and eating. The best way is to finish a bowl of noodle, whether it's Saimin or ramen, within about 10, not more than 15 minutes. So timing is important. And the reason why you have different types of broth and soup is you have to match the soup and the broth with the type of noodles. So the type of noodles that's made with different material, the ingredients, wheat, some of them combine wheat with rice, and then you have to have the right side of kind of soup and broth to adhere to the noodle. So Saimin is a more thinner, more delicate kind of noodle. So the broth is thinner, so that when you eat it, it doesn't feel so heavy.
Now, when you're eating it, I think the biggest thing is the slurping, right?
Oh yeah.
That aids at the speed. It aids with you being able to eat it while it's super hot. And there's nothing wrong with slurping, making a lot of noise, and sometimes even having some broth kind of going around around your area.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any Japanese food video, you'll see Japanese people eating slurping noodle. Culturally, it's totally appropriate. In some ways, some chef feels that it's a show of respect for their food. The reason why you slurp it is that it's very much like when you're tasting wine. You aerate the wine, or you suck air in when you tasting the wine. So when you're slurping, you actually inhale air together with the food. And the air, oxygen in the air actually accentuate the flavor of the noodle. Now, a lot of these noodles have very delicate and subtle flavor. So by slurping air and noodle together, you're actually helping the noodle taste better in your mouth.
Well, and I think as you're slurping the noodle, you're also slurping up the broth at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
So you're getting this incredible combination of flavors,
And
right?
you cool down the broth, because again, we say you gotta eat the broth, eat the noodle and drink the broth piping hot. So when you're slurping, you're actually cooling down the broth as you eat it.
So we're gonna take a break really fast so we can get some noodles, so we can actually see how you slurp.
I'm ready.
We're back with some Saimin noodles. I was telling you when I was little, I think it was my mom, she's gonna kill me if I said this. I think she told me that if you bite the noodles in half, you're gonna shorten your life.
Well, depends on what part of Japan you're from, or whether it's part of your family tradition.
Well, I think if you bite the noodles in half, it's gonna get smaller and smaller, and it's gonna
Right,
be hard to
right.
get out of the noodle anyways. Okay, so what are some tips we can have for slurping the noodles and eating it properly?
Well, the first thing is you don't want to grab too much of noodle. You want to just grab a mouthful, just enough to put in your mouth. And then you want to raise it away from the soup so doesn't get tangled into the soup. And you want to deliver the noodle into your mouth with a chopstick instead of trying to bend over and dive into the noodle. So you go, deliver the noodle into your mouth.
So you're shoving it in your mouth with the chopstick.
Mm-hmm. We call it deliver.
Okay, I can't slurp good. You were telling me make a...
An O or round shape in your mouth, you relax it. You don't want to tighten it.
So you're not doing like one big, you're doing like short.
A few continuous short breath, almost like so.
I think you can use your chopstick to help it along too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
Now let
I'm
me do a
tasting
slow
pork
motion.
fat.
So almost like you almost left it totally from the bowl.
I don't know if it fully from the bowl.
The only thing is, you shouldn't be talking with noodle in your mouth.
All right, let me try again. Oh, so you're lifting all the noodles from the bowl.
Yes,
it's
as
not
much as
still
you can, right?
dragging in the
Mhm.
broth.
So you know how much is left behind.
Okay, I can't get the really loud slurp that you're getting.
You need practice. So.
But I think you eat noodles all the time, right? Like you could eat noodles every meal if you...
Just about, I'm happy with it. And you can always rotate. You can eat ramen one day, Saimin another day. You can use wonton min another day, so you get variation, right? But in most cases, when you eat Asian noodles, it's perfectly okay to slurp.
And you always used to say if you had your way, noodles would be the last meal of the day for you, like a late snack?
Actually, in many Asian countries, you can eat noodle in the morning, lunch, or dinner. So it depends on how you feel.
Okay, so I think that's a good introduction to slurping. So to recap, don't bite, because mom says you will shorten your life. You are lifting the noodles out of the broth so it's not dragging in the broth. You're putting it into your mouth with the chopstick, and you're doing multiple slurps, and you can assist with the chopsticks if you need. Any other tips?
Slurp away.
Hi, Chef Alan.
Aloha.
Thank you so much for sharing your grandfather's dashi recipe for Saimin. That was really special.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I remember, like I said in the video, I remember walking through the door, having to be invited over to my grandfather's house for Simon, and always Simon was always a special day. Wasn't necessarily a special occasion like Mother's Day or Father's Day or Christmas or whatever. It was just a special day because we get to come over to Grandpa's house and have Simon, and that like I said, the smell that as soon as you open the front door was just amazing, and just couldn't wait. And we have big appetites back on Kauai, so you know we ate a bowl like that. We eat like 2, 3 bowls.
2 to 3 bowls.
Oh yeah, we made the best of it.
And I think it's really interesting that, on Kauai, you didn't have access to char siu. So you ended up frying the pork chop or the pork and utilizing the pork fat, which actually really enhances the broth flavor.
Yeah, back home we had a few Chinese restaurants, but none of them were really selling roast pork or char siu. So that it was simple. It was simple times back then. So my grandfather would just buy pork, and of course the pork that he would buy would be local pork from two of the old stores that are no longer there, um, actually three of the stores that had local pork. And he would fry that up really slow in the pan. All the fat would be rendering out, and he would use that fat. He would save the fat, and then it would ended up adding it into the Simon. And as I remember as a kid, we didn't have access to it. You know, we our table was in because we had my grandfather's small house. Our table was out in the living room, and the adults would be eating in the dining room, and that's where the fat was. So we had no access to it, and so we when we got older, we were able to eat have some fat in there. When I got for the first time when I got it, I'm like, whoa, this salmon now tastes totally different. It tastes like was good without it. It tastes awesome now. So
And I
you guys
really
should try it.
liked the addition of black pepper
Yeah,
into the broth because
yeah,
I thought it gave it such amazing flavor as well. And I'm going to start doing that too.
yeah. So
Is
just a
that a
little.
Kauai thing?
I'm not sure. You know, if you go to Hamura Saimin, you know, they have pepper. They have pepper there too. But I
Hamura is the
remember,
famous Saimin
yeah,
restaurant
it's a
on Kauai
James,
at the
yeah,
institution, you know.
yeah, James Beard, uh, award-winning restaurant that sells Simon. It's a Simon stand, and it's been there for a long, long time now. But yeah, we always had pepper, and we would put pepper in our Simon, and you know, not a lot, just a little, but it definitely changes the flavor again, and it makes it awesome. So
So
take it at
taking a
home. You
break
should.
really fast, I forgot to say this is Chef Alan Tsuchiyama, Chef Instructor Alan Tsuchiyama from the Kapiolani Community College Culinary Program. And if those of you watching have questions about food, I guess if you have questions outside of food, you could ask that as well. But you know, he has a lot of expertise in this area. So if you have questions that you want to ask him, or topics you would like him to talk about, if not, we're just going to talk about what we want to talk about. So you know, it sounds like Saimin is very much nostalgia. It's something that is very much something that is like family food memories, and it's something that's just very special to a lot of people in Hawaii. And what you talked about it a little bit on the video, but what makes Saimin different from ramen?
So you know, Simon, the broth already is different. The broth is made with usually shrimp base, dried shrimp, and kombu. Other people will put shiitake mushrooms, or they put other things inside. My grandfather used to put the pork bone that he, because he had it. You know, he had the pork bone there from his pork chop, so he'll put that into his pot. Um, but that would be pretty much the basic, or the basis for a Simon broth. As far as the noodles go, the noodles is usually contains eggs, and it's a little more curly, usually wavy, and chewier, and sometimes thicker. But again, each Simon shop has their own kind of little variation of it, and it should be like that, you know, because everybody has their own signature Simon broth, their own signature Simon noodle, and if everybody tasted the same, that would be kind of boring, right? So, you know, but that's kind of the difference. The ramens, you know, although there's so many different kinds of ramen, you know, shoyu based ramen, the miso based ramen, there's a tonkotsu ramen with lots of bones in it. Um, Kind of different from our Simon here in Hawaii. You know, it's almost always clear. The broth is clear. You know, you can find Simon all over the place. You find Simon, you know, in your
At
Simon
a
stands
7-Eleven.
across. Yeah, you find them at 7-Eleven. You find them at McDonald's here. You find them at all the football games, all of the sporting events, and you know, there's Simon all over the place. So we in Hawaii we love Simon. The
And you can
ramen.
also add in wonton. You can pair it with terry beef sticks, terry burger. I mean, this is just something that is such a Hawaii thing.
Oh yeah, and you know, back when I first came from, when I was in on Kauai, we used to go visit. My grandfather made great Simon, so we hardly ventured out. But when we went out to Hamura Saimin once in a while, because they have great Simon also, um, they served their. You could buy barbecue sticks, basically beef sticks, teriyaki sauce, and they would grill them. Then when I came up to Honolulu, then I started to eat the Saimin at Washington Saimin, which is long gone, but on King Street, they had Saimin with burgers, you know. So and that's how they eat it up here in Honolulu many times with a small burger, not a big burger, a small burger, and it's a wonderful thing. And you know, like you and Daniel went over, you eat it anytime. We used to eat it late at night, you know, way past dinner. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and that's the best time to eat salmon, you know. So that's when we used to eat salmon. So we eat salmon all the time.
So you gave a demonstration as well of using the Saimin noodles to make fried Saimin. And Alton Chung, the storyteller, is asking if you don't want to use the packet that comes with the noodle, how would you season the fried Saimin?
Oh, that's a great question. So, if you don't have the Simon packet, you can use all different kinds of things. So I've done it in I did all kinds of ways. So you can just use shoyu if you wanted to. a little bit of soy sauce. You can use oyster sauce. In Hawaii, we love to use oyster sauce. We put oyster sauce on everything, so we can put it with fried noodles. When we make fried rice, we put oyster sauce. Or you can put hondashi. Hondashi is probably going to be the closest thing to your salmon soup base. So if you take some hondashi and you sprinkle it on your noodle, it's just awesome. So you know, this is a very basic recipe that I showed on the video, but there's so many different ways that you can make it your own. Yeah, and even the vegetables, you put whatever vegetables. They put carrots in, they put bean sprouts in, they put all kinds of stuff, all kinds of meat. We love spam in Hawaii, so we put spam in our fried noodles. So you can do all kinds of things with it. It's just a great
I
dish.
think it's just whatever's in your fridge, whatever's in your pantry or freezer, you're just like kind of using it up, yeah.
Absolutely, that's what I do. It's time to clean out the refrigerator, grab a bag of Saimin and make it up.
So Kathy asks, she said, we had an Aloha Saimin in LA in the Virgil J. Flats area up till the 70s and 80s. I wonder if this restaurant was related to the one you mentioned. I'm guessing that's Hamura's.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure if they were related, but I know in Hawaii we have a few Simon stands left. But back in the day there were many Simon stands all over the place. Um, you know,
And they're
almost
not
like
all connected.
yeah,
So,
almost like the ramen stands that you see now, the ramen shops popping up. We had Simon stands like that all over the place. So, and it's a very plantation thing. It started off in the plantation days, where there were the plantation camps, where they would set up their little stands so people could have Simon. And I'm sure it was very inexpensive. It was something that um, the workers could afford and could eat, and was a hot meal, was noodles, was very satisfying. And that's kind of where it started off, and then just kind of like because it's very flavorful, because it's so good, that people started to eat more and more of it, and then it became businesses for people. It was a livelihood, and still is for many people here in Hawaii.
so Kathy also asks, what are some of the variations on the basic broth of dried shrimp and kombu? Anything else added or different?
So I think with the shrimp and the kombu, that is your super basic Simon broth, and it's great. The addition of pork, you can add chicken bones if you wanted to. Shiitake mushrooms will give it a whole new flavor profile because of the umami from the dried shiitake mushrooms. If you put fresh ones in, not a whole lot of flavor. So, if you put dried shiitake mushrooms in, good quality dried shiitake mushrooms, you're gonna get beautiful umami flavor coming out of that. So,
So
if
you're
you think
putting the
about
dried mushroom directly into your broth, into your water that's boiling?
first you soak it and get it soft, and then
Yeah.
you drop it into the broth. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and you just drop it in there, and you could take it out, and you can slice it up, use it for garnish if you wanted to at the end. Not going to have a whole lot of flavor, but at least going to be there. You don't have to throw it out. So even though the dried shrimps, sometimes, even though there's no flavor to them, it's been boiling for a few hours, but we used to take them, and just because we're eating shrimps, right, we used to put them back on our salmon, and kind of eat it that way. But there's no flavor to it already, but it just looked good. Yeah, but
So
yeah.
if people can't get Saimin noodles, you mentioned in the video to look for ramen noodles. But can you elaborate on what people on the mainland, especially that might not have access to Saimin noodles, can
Yeah,
replace it with?
so every place got ramen noodles, so if you want like a fresh noodles, then you gotta go look for fresh noodles in ramen. Or if you have a Chinatown, remember this noodles probably got derived from Chinese noodle anyway. So if you go down to your Chinatown and look for a noodle, egg noodle, that would probably work, right? But again, try to see if you can find one that's a little thicker, especially if you're gonna be making fried salmon. If you're making the with the broth, then not necessarily have to be really on the thick side, because it's gonna be you're gonna be putting in a broth. So it's I think what you look for is profile as far as the texture goes, um, and how well it's going to hold up in the broth. And at that point, if you don't have access to Simon, whatever works, whatever you think going to work in there as far as the chewiness, I think that's what you want to look for.
And I think for people from the mainland, and they come visit Oahu, we have two places on Oahu that make the noodles in house. So there's Shige Saimin in Wahiwa that's using a machine from Japan, and they make their noodles, I think, every day, and it's a very curly noodle. And the other one is Shiro's Saimin, and Shiro has like what, like 100 different kinds of or Saimin combinations that you can order from him.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So, yeah, when you guys come to Hawaii, make sure that you guys go visit our Simon shop. Palace Simon is one of the
Oh
old
yeah,
old,
yeah.
old favorites, and Palace Simon is uh, pretty basic, but again, hole in the wall, but amazing Simon, and it's right in Kalihi, so it's
And
right
their
on.
broth has not changed. It's what's been passed down from, I guess, the original owner up to. And I love the story for them where they said people used to just bring their pot to the restaurant. They would just fill up their pot, and people would just take the pot with the broth and then boil it, add in the noodles at home. I was like, how many places, do that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when we were discussing, what to make, like what are Hawaii foods, like foods that developed in Hawaii or are very unique to Hawaii, Saimin obviously came up really fast. And it's really interesting that cake noodle is said to be made in Hawaii, originated in Hawaii, and it was made with Saimin noodles. Actually, Alton has a question. Said, you roasted your char siu in the oven. How did you do that?
So, I have a wolf oven. So there's some wonderful. They make wonderful ovens, and there's a dual fan in there, so it blows the hot air. So I basically took, just like the Chinese restaurant, I took hooks, I hooked the meat, I hooked them up on the rack, and let it hang, and I put a pan underneath to catch all of the drippings, and just fired it up, and it basically cooked in there. So you gotta be careful, because if you have smoke detectors close by, it might be going off. But it came out really, really good, just by hanging it and cooking it that way. So it's
So
got
people who don't have fancy wolf ovens will set off their smoke alarm.
you might and I thought about putting water on the bottom in the pan, because that's what people do. But if you put water, then you create humidity in the oven, and I didn't want all the humidity, so I left it. So plumes of smoke kind of came out of my oven. But my fire detector is like away, a little bit away out, not in the kitchen. So I was okay. I survived that one. But if not, yeah, I don't know how else you could do it, because if you go with a lower fire, what's going to happen is you're not going to get that caramelization on the outside, um, and by the time you get the caramelization on the outside, if it's too low, the oven, I think that gonna be all overcooked. So yeah, so I used my oven, and it worked. Might not work for everybody.
So we talked about some of the other, like not Hawaiian food, but food that kind of developed after that. So we talked about like lomi lomi salmon because salmon was introduced by early Western sailors. Chicken heka, the video that you did for the first Tadaima. Chicken long rice, manapua, pork hash, arsimon, loco moco, spam musubi, poke, terry beef. Because I was reading that teriyaki originated in Hawaii. Haupia, which uses cornstarch, the cake noodle with the saimin noodle, huli huli chicken, butter mochi, prune mui, lihing. So actually, there's a lot of food that kind of is
Yep.
is unique to Hawaii. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about was ingredients that were used a lot in the olden days, but are not so popular today with younger generations. I think a lot about things like fish cake, kamaboko, chikua, gobo tempura. What happens to these small family businesses making fish cake? Like we have Okuhara Foods, on Oahu. What happens when you know, people stop eating these ingredients or view them as old fashioned? What happens to these small factories that are making it fresh, and how do we reintroduce the ingredient, or what will happen if we don't reintroduce the ingredient?
So, I think that most of these ingredients. Let's just talk about fish cake. For now, like the fish cake, they they're trying their best to try to keep up with the times. So as far as packaging goes, as far as creating new flavors, so like in the past, if you went down to a supermarket, 30 years ago, you would find the kamaboko chikuwa, and you would find gobo tempura. Now gobo tempura, fish cake. Now you can find vegetable. You find maybe I think they're experimenting now with sweet potato fish cake and some others. So
Melon, garlic.
yeah, so they're definitely trying to develop flavors that might appeal to the next generation. But I really think that they can only do so much. I think it's our generation, it's my generation, that needs to be sure that it's not lost, and that we make sure that our children and our children's children keep eating these foods. So if we're not using it at home, if we're not serving it at home at our family meals, then our children don't know about it. So it's very important that we buy it, we introduce it to our children, so you know they can pass it on to the next generation and next generation.
I
And
think
then
for most people, they know the kamaboko, like you used in the recipe today, the pink and white one on the wooden thing,
Mhm.
and uzumaki, the kind of like the rounder one with the swirl
Right,
in the center,
sure, correct,
because those are garnishes for ramen, saimin, whatever, right?
right, right,
But if you're trying to think beyond how else can you use it, I think a lot of it is just we don't know.
right.
I think some people do what, kamaboko dip.
They do dips. I make sandwich fillings with them, so it's almost like a egg salad sandwich, but I shred up the kamaboko and I use that.
What do you do? You
Um,
shred up the kamaboko, put mayonnaise,
Mayonnaise, salt and
what
pepper.
salt and pepper. That's
That's
it.
Yeah, that's it. Boom, in the bread, and put some lettuce, whatever else you want to put in there. It's awesome. It's good. So we put it into potato salad. We put into macaroni salads. Those are also good. We can cut them and shred them up. We can put them into broccoli salads. We use it for garnish for somen salads. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah. So there's many things that we try to use it up in. If we make I think my grandma, when she used to make a okara, she used to cut up some of the kamaboko and throw it in there also. But
That's
there's
another
other.
ingredient that, Aloha Tofu has more okada than there is demand. And so he ends up selling it super cheap to chicken farmers, I think.
Pig farmers.
Pig farmers.
Yeah.
And then, it's like, okay, so is this another ingredient that is gonna that needs to maybe be reintroduced?
Right. Yeah. So okara is the uh, leftover after making the uh, milk that goes into making tofu. So first they gotta take the soybeans, they gotta reconstitute it, they gotta cook it, then they squeeze out the milk, so they can make tofu, and this leftover is okara. And right now, Aloha Tofu, they sell it in our supermarkets, and people still buy it and they prepare it so we can have it as like kind of like a side dish. Um, but most of it goes to the pig farmer, right? Which is good because it doesn't go to waste. But it would be nice if we can try reintroduce it into other things. So Aloha Tofu, they've been very good about it. They've been trying to do, use it in other ways. I
Well,
remember.
Dr. Tamamoto from the Culinary Innovation Center over at the Culinary Institute of the Pacific, she used okada to create like a pizza crust, right?
Correct.
Kind of like along the lines of a cauliflower, but because it's using okada, it actually had more fiber, or it was a little bit better for you than the
Right.
cauliflower.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there are ways you can use it. Definitely ways you can use it. They use it
Well,
in
Aloha
bread.
Tofu had like a baker on staff for a while, and they were kind of making a flour out of the okada, so they were able to make cookies
Right.
and puddings and just any kind of crazy combinations,
Right.
cream puffs.
Yep. Yep. Definitely.
But the whole thing about fish cake. Um, what's really interesting is gobo tempura which sounds kind of weird to people because tempura just means fried, right? So they're frying this gobo fish cake, but just calling it gobo tempura. We actually found out that the origin of that one is actually Okinawa. They have a Ryukyuin fish cake that was developed there. And I was talking to Maika Teruya of Okuhara Foods and saying, they have this amazing marmia fish cake that they bring in from Okinawa. That's like, I always buy you the garlic one, right? That's just studded with garlic. And it's kind of neat because Micah's kind of going to research and see what he can learn from the motherland to see if that, so, like, hey, what about doing this type of garlic Okinawan style fish cake? And then I was telling him about bakudan. So that is this, it's really popular in Okinawa. It's a giant rice ball. So they can put different flavors or even juicy. And then it's covered in a fish cake, and then fried. And so it's like this big rice ball that you can take to the beach or you can
Whoa.
just bring to parties.
Yum.
And
Sounds
I
good.
love this idea that he's gonna get inspiration from the place of origin and try and use it to maybe reintroduce or revitalize.
Mm, sounds good. Sounds yummy.
Well, that's on the list, right? Eat our way through Okinawa. But so you talked about your generation or other generations need to be using these ingredients. Is it, I mean, a lot of it I think is people just don't know how, right?
Yeah, and most of the time, these especially the fried fish cakes and stuff, um, they're ready to go. You can just eat them. You can just eat it just like that, as a side dish, which is excellent, right? Which is excellent. But some of those like the gobo tempura, which comes in kind of like little balls. I slice them up and I cook them with beans with some shoyu sugar. Oh, it's excellent. I cut. They have some that kind of like looks like a patty, and I slice that and I put them into the bread, and it makes wonderful sandwiches. So there's
And
so many
super
things.
good in oden, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, perfect in oden. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so
So,
got so much things you could do with it.
well, to put you on the spot because you're here, one of the things that's one of the things that's interesting is the Hawaii regional cuisine movement, where as crazy as it sounds, in the past people used to think that things brought in was superior, and it took these local chefs to say no, local ingredients are better, let's source local. But what I find interesting about the whole Hawaii regional cuisine movement is where you start seeing these really amazing dishes start coming out, where it is is the name like Hawaii regional cuisine or is it Pacific? Like Roy Yamaguchi's style of cooking is called what?
So, it, how many years ago? In the 1980s, 12 chefs came together. 12 amazing chefs came together, and they decided to highlight their cuisine through the products that were available here in Hawaii. So they work with farmers, they work with the local ranchers, they bought local fish, but not taking away from their style of cuisine. And they started to make dishes to sell, and they basically branded themselves as the Hawaii regional chefs. So it's a Hawaii regional cuisine. So basically, the philosophy behind Hawaii regional cuisine is about using local product as much as possible. And when I was at a hotel in the 80s, we bought everything in. We needed white asparagus, we bought it in. We needed this, wasn't in season, we bought it in. But now it's and they were ahead of their time. I think Hawaii regional cuisine, because now it's something that everybody does. Everybody around the world is doing seasonal, and although we can buy it from wherever we wanted to, now we try to, as much as possible, embrace whoever's here and help the farmers, because especially living in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, we need to definitely be working hand in hand with our farmers and our ranchers to see if we, as much as possible, help them out and keep our economy going here. And it's about food security, that they need to grow. So if one day we can't get get product from the mainland or from where it is, we can still sustain ourselves. But we need more farmers. So in Hawaii, and again, I go back to you know the people that live here, that buy groceries, that gonna eat. We have a decision to make, and our decision should be first. If we can afford local, we buy local first. And farmers market is the best place that you can go because it's usually all local. Yeah.
And I think, there's a full circle return to really learning from the native Hawaiians. There's a push, especially for Polynesian introduced things like ulu, breadfruit, and taro. So whether it's poi or pa'iai, there is a really concerted effort to be growing it and for chefs to be using it, even home cooks, right?
Right. So, ulu is becoming more and more popular. It's breadfruit, and it was something that the Hawaiians could grow and could eat, and it was very sustainable. Um, Taro, or in Hawaii we call it kalo. In Hawaiian it's called kalo. That is something that um, is needs and it's being reintroduced, but for a while, the sale of kalo, the consumption of kalo went down dramatically. And again, it goes back to, generations and how if they ate it. If the generation didn't eat it, then for sure the next generation not gonna eat it. So we're trying to, reintroduce taro or kalo in other ways, not only poi. So poi consumption was very high in the 50s and 60s, and then it started to go to dive, take a dive. So we need to reintroduce, the consumption of poi and also the consumption of just kalo in general. Coming from Hawaii, living in Hawaii, I'm fourth generation now. Um, to preserve taro, and for the Hawaiians, taro is life, or kalo is life. So to preserve this, it's very very important. It's very very important. So,
Well, I
when
think it's
everybody,
great that you take your class to farms and to experts who will talk to your students, introduce them to the ingredient, and make it less intimidating for them. I think that's great.
yeah, yeah. So when you guys all come to Hawaii, please eat some Saimin and eat some kalo.
But we've been talking about nostalgia and about making sure that these old recipes and dishes of the past don't die out. But, part of with the talking about the Hawaii regional cuisine is I find it so fascinating where you see chefs creating, these amazing dishes that, pull from their roots. And I was thinking, you had a dish when you were at our fine dining restaurant at the college, which was like the shiitake crusted salmon with like some kind of beurre blanc sauce attached to it. Um, to me, that combines all these different ingredients. And can you walk people through that dish? Just because I think it's a good example of how things are continuing to evolve here in our food scene.
So we take as chefs, we look at what we grew up with. First of all, and I think most chefs are like that. We always fall back on what we used to eat, what our parents and our grandparents used to serve us, and we try to recreate some things. And shiitake is something that is very flavorful, lots of umami, especially when it's dried. And I used to use salmon. Now I use more local fish if possible, and I crust it. So basically, you know, I take the shiitake mushroom, the dry shiitake mushrooms, I put them into a low oven. I get it even drier, so I can puree it and turn it into kind of like a flour. And then I take it and I dust the fish with it, and then I go and saute it. It was served with a green mustard sauce. Green mustard sauce is kind of a, I've traveled a bit. I worked in Chicago for a while, so that was something that we served with fish that had lots of flavor. Because green mustard is very flavorful. So I served it with this shiitake crust, so it kind of matched it. So kind of that's kind of how when we do flavor profiles and we start to combine things, we go back on our what not only what we see but what we've experienced in the past. So and it could be from our experiences as a chef or experience as a child, growing up, and that's kind of how we pull things together. That's why all the chefs are all kind of different now when they start cooking. They're not cooking the same thing because we all have different backgrounds and different histories. So and when Chef Wong talks to our classes and stuff, he'll always talk about, going back to your roots, going back
You're
to
talking about Chef Alan
yeah,
Wong, one
yes,
of the original 12.
yeah, one of the original 12. He'll talk about going back to your roots. What makes you, tick inside, right? And pull those things up because you never want those flavors to disappear. You always want those flavors to be with you, and you want other people to enjoy it, and your kids to enjoy it, so they can pass it on and pass it on and pass it on and pass it on, and that's very important. I think it's so important.
I think like Chef Wade Ueoka of MW Restaurant, he has a mochi crusted fish with somen noodles and kimchi. And, that just seems so Hawaii, right? Where it's like it doesn't matter if you're not Korean, you can still respect and use, different ingredients and inspiration. Hey, we do have a question from someone asking, do you have a cookbook on sale, Chef Tsuchiyama?
No, I don't. I don't have a cookbook.
Sounds like maybe you need to,
I've, I've,
that
I've
teaches
thought about it,
people
but
about stuff like chicken heka and how to use kamaboko and okara.
oh, that'd be a good one.
Yeah. Actually, Kapiolani Community College's culinary program has a series of cookbooks out if anyone's interested. It's called Dash of Aloha. It's heart healthy recipes. So they take local Hawaii dishes and they make them healthier, right? Like heart healthy.
Yes,
But they
yes.
also have Splash of Aloha that covers seafood, a sweet dash of Aloha that covers dessert. I actually have no idea how you buy it. I know they exist. But I like the idea that they tried to make local dishes heart healthy because obviously our dishes are not always healthy,
Yeah, yeah, and in general in America, many of our dishes or many of the things that we love to eat are not very healthy. When I go onto the Food Network and I look at all the things that they highlight, it's like, ooh, that's not good for us. So we need to start eating healthier, and I kind of promote that in my class to try to eat healthier when possible.
So I think if you guys want Chef Alan to make a cookbook, please comment and persuade him because I don't think you're convinced yet. Yeah. Well, actually, it's like you have to just promise, hey, I would absolutely buy your cookbook. But given all the years and years and years that you've been teaching at the culinary program at KCC, what I mean, things have obviously going to change over that time. What have you been noticing about food in Hawaii?
You know, I think food in Hawaii is changing. I think there's a new generation of chefs um, that are being noticed here in Hawaii, and they're bringing their own flair to the food. I think it's very exciting to see, and I think the food is how we say, sometimes a bit more, is a little lighter. It's creative, and it's just different. It's not, and I think that's the great thing about food, and not only in Hawaii but all over the place, that it evolves, right? It evolves with everybody, with all the chefs that are coming up. They have a different take on what they want to cook, and I think that I'm seeing this as the years go by, and as my students start to cook and start to get out there and be chefs, and sous chefs, that I see them, cooking things that when I look at it, it's like, wow, this is awesome. This is not like things that I'm used to, right? That I cook. So I think it's just so gratifying to see that the students are out there and doing amazing things, and the food in Hawaii is evolving, and it's no longer, mahi mahi, and it's no longer, old school dishes, and it's becoming very, very trendy and very uh, healthier, lighter, um, you know, and not necessarily more flavorful, but um, just I think refined. So yeah, I think it's great.
And I think it's funny that you see very prominent chefs like Chris Kajioka and Mark Noguchi. They just recently opened up what like an old school Saimin shop. I mean, with their own twist, using like local ingredients. Um, and then you see Chef Sheldon Simeon,
Yeah,
um, from Maui, where he's making these videos showing how he makes saimin. And I love the quote he gives at the end of that video, which says, hey, ramen is trendy, but saimin is life. And that just, I love that you have these chefs who are, on the national stage, but they're still respecting the plantation roots or, like the food from their childhood.
definitely, definitely. I think most of our local chefs here, enjoy eating a bowl of round Saimin, and that Saimin is very basic, just like what I just cooked. So it's very very basic, but yet just brings everything home.
I think
Um,
it's imbued with so much history and it's tied into so much of our identity and our feelings of home
yeah, definitely,
that I can see where, it's like, yeah, ramen is the trend, but Simon is just who we are.
yeah, definitely.
Well, on that note, I'm going to wrap things up. Again, you've got a captive audience right now. Do you have anything you want to say?
Well, try making some Saimin. I think you guys are gonna enjoy it. Try making the fried Saimin. If you guys like yakisoba or other fried noodle dishes, you guys gonna like this one. It's a little bit different, but refreshing, and again, it's a piece of history for Hawaii. So, try it, eat it when you get to Hawaii. Visit those restaurants that provide these wonderful dishes, and aloha. Take care. Stay safe.
Oh, and we would like people to video their own slurping. So after they make Chef Alan's grandfather's dashi and they make their own saimin, to please record their own slurping video, kind of like what Alton Chung did, and to put pressure on Kimiko. She said she would as well. But please upload it onto the Tadaima community page because that'll be fun.
Yeah, let's see everybody slurp.
Aloha.
Aloha.